Chapter 871, This sounds fishy. The Void Plan. What's this? An elf picked up the bag of candies with pictures of a fruit on it. Durian-flavored candies? This seems to be the picture of a fruit. Salah said happily, fruit-flavored candies must be good. These elves especially liked fruits. Xuanhuan picked up the box which looked like the box for spicy sticks that were sold in the shop. What are these? Tofu that tastes like spicy sticks? Xuanhuan picked up a bag of seaweed and said eagerly, I've never seen this before, but it looks good. I'll try this first. Wow! The elves were thrilled. They had heard about these snacks that weren't for sale in the shop, but they had never tasted them before. They were in luck today to try the delicacies that others couldn't have. After all, these snacks were not for sale, and it was the only opportunity for them to eat such snacks. At this moment, other people in the shop glanced at them enviously. Then, I'll open this box. Xuanhuan said cheerfully. Me too. Salah and other elves each took out a candy. They unwrapped their snacks eagerly. I'm eating it. At this moment, Xuanhuan tore open a small packet of seaweed and almost instantly stuffed a few sheets of seaweed into her little mouth. At the last moment, she suppressed her impatience and took a small bite delicately. Instantly, her little pink face changed color. Then, a weird stinky braised taste together with an indescribable pungent taste began to spread out. It felt as if they had opened Pandora's box. As if someone dropped a biohazardous bomb into the lounge area. The elves' faces turned yellow at the smells. This is... what? Ah, poo, poo, poo. Xuanhuan's little face turned bitter at this pungent and spicy taste. Water, I need water. While fanning at her little pink tongue, she hurried off to find water. So stinky. Salah covered her nose, feeling suffocated. Dizzy from the stinky smell, Xuanhuan closed the box lid with difficulty, and her face turned green due to suffocation. She turned her head and saw that all the other people in the shop had moved more than 30 meters away from them with their hands covering their noses. Their envious expression changed, and it looked as if they had seen a ghost. They had a feeling that this group of people might be eating some poop together. Unlike them, the faction masters, elders, and leaders such as Xuanhuan, Zongwu, Xixi spiritual master, and even demonic woman Ningbai had many pieces of business to tend to. After all, Mr. Fang's job was managing the shops, and the player's job was playing the games. The other stuff also needed attention and management. At this moment, Ningbu was supervising the wardens of Half City while the latter interrogated the captives from the innumerable immortal sea and ninefold darkness. Meanwhile, the faction masters and elders of different factions were talking about the subsequent plans. Even the West Continent sent representatives to join the discussion. The innumerable immortal sea was even more busy. Wondrous spell High Holiness was a top figure among the elders, not only in the Gui family but in all other families. In the expedition that he led in person, he was wounded severely and forced to retreat in defeat. This incident had a great impact not only in the innumerable immortal sea but in the whole heavenly realm. Meanwhile, in the ninefold darkness the fierce generals led by ninefold darkness demon general tried to borrow path in the mortal world with the huge heaven-devouring turtle to launch a sneak attack at the heavenly realm, but the moment they landed, they were driven back in defeat. This news had swiftly spread all over the demon army of ninefold darkness. In the Gui family in the innumerable immortal sea, wondrous spell High Holiness stared at the distance coldly with squinted eyes. The moment we moved, we encountered a monster with a hairy face and a protruding mouth. I don't believe that such a powerful demon monkey exists in the mortal world. Is it a demon from the ninefold darkness army? What's their scheme? In the ninefold darkness army, the ninefold darkness demon general knelt inside a grand palace despite its severe wounds. A gloomy voice came from the endless darkness before it. You were ambushed the moment that you arrived in the mortal world. And those humans' power was far beyond your imagination. Perhaps it was an ambush set by the godly court. Wondrous Spell High Holiness said, "This whole thing feels fishy. We'll make a decision after I report to the godly court and a thorough investigation is done." The voice from the ninefold darkness said, "This must be a scheme. I'll put your defeat aside for the moment. Find out the background of the human masters whom you encountered in the mortal world and find a way to redeem yourself. Report." Meanwhile, in the innumerable immortal sea and in the ninefold darkness, they both received a report. 2 of our captives were sent back with a message from the Cultivator Alliance in the mortal world. What message? The people in both places turned dark. Bring them in. The 2 captives knelt and delivered the message. They said they would break any clause extending into their world. They said, "We never start wars, but we'll do our best to fight you if you want wars." The people from the 2 places instantly turned livid. Outrageous. They are so outrageous. What shall we do, High Holiness? An immortal from the Gui family in the innumerable immortal sea asked. They knew who their opponent was without thinking. But I still feel like there's something fishy. Wondrous Spell High Holiness said coldly. In the godly palace, the god who was dressed in 5-colored godly armor read the intelligence report that the godly palace had just received. News came from the godly court. They decided to bide their time. The god of radiant light sat on his godly throne with no emotion could be seen on his face, and he said, "I'm afraid even they are suspicious that the ninefold darkness army is behind it. They will have peace talks with the mortal world and pay ransom for the captives. They will give the humans some benefits to study them, after the truth comes out." He said with a chuckle, "It's a good plan. After they find out the truth, I'm afraid that the mortal world will become the new battleground between them and the ninefold darkness army." High Holiness, the mortal world also demanded us to clear the Thunderbolt Zone in the void. Thunderbolt Zone in the void. Wondrous Spell High Holiness said with a sneer, "What a joke. Tell them that this zone has come into being for a long time and is a zone of its own. Thus, it isn't easy to clear. Aren't they very powerful? They can pass it if they are able to. If they can't, it's not our fault." The people living in the innumerable immortal sea had blood sacrifice seals in the demon-slaying platform and thus could manage to descend to the lower region despite the great price they had to pay. These humans think that they are powerful, but how can they be compared with us? Meanwhile, in the UI Taoist Alliance on the big square of the Taoist Alliance parked several cutting-edge spiritual ships. Now that the Cultivation Alliance and the warriors had saint-level masters among them, they began to carry out the Void Plan. Artifact Master Jun Yang Tsai of the UI Taoist Alliance had a jade slip in his hand. The jade slip contained the key projects such as the portal to the alternate world as shown in Diablo 2, the warp technology in StarCraft, the void creatures shown in League of Legends, and the ascendance plan of the Qianghua faction shown in the Legend of Sword and Fairy 4. Some projects were old research projects which had gained certain results. For example, there were portal and teleportation technology in Diablo 2 and the void energy in League of Legends. Some projects were brand new without any clues, such as the warp technology in StarCraft. They sat together and talked. Let's begin these projects first. For the cultivators, this was a grand plan, but a bit far-fetched for now. Chapter 872, Plans for Mobile Games? It was deep in the night. The giant dead heaven-devouring turtle provided the cultivators a temporary landing place at the entrance to the plane of ninefold darkness in the Yellow Spring Sea. They constructed large stretches of land and islands with earth element spells on the huge corpse of the demon, and they built a monitoring station to observe the strange movements on the other side of the crevice at the ocean bottom. It was cold in the ocean during the night. Several black-robed cultivators slowly flew up from the bottom of the ocean and came out of the sea. Elder, guys. In the dark night, the cultivators cupped their hands and reported, "Our enemy seems to have sent many soldiers to guard the bottom of the ocean on their side. We didn't dare to venture too deep. But during our short investigation, we found that the spiritual essence in the nearby areas mainly contains yin and water properties on top of the 5 properties. There is gloomy and evil murderous presence in it, so ordinary cultivators can't inhale it to recover essence. I feel the opposite. The long-haired male cultivator dressed in a black cloak was Black Demon. The essence flowed more smoothly in my meridians when I was engulfed in the pure murderous presence. The heavenly books said that when the heavens separated the earth, the light essence rose while the heavy essence fell. We each chose one type of essence to cultivate, and there are few geniuses who can cultivate both and go back to undone. The speaker was the Nanhua faction master. It seems that we must rely on you guys from Half City to handle the ninefold darkness. Despite the disagreements between these factions and those cultivators in Half City, they were not mortal enemies and could put their disagreements aside to deal with the common enemy. While they were discussing the strategy in the depths of the vast pitch-black ocean bottom, hidden currents surged in the deep crevice. A pale blue array barrier lit up silently, blocking the strange and evil ocean demons from the opposite side from crossing the boundary. But at this moment, a surge of thick and black essence slowly flew out through the array barrier in silence without alerting the barrier at all. These stupid humans don't know the great powers of our clan, a voice sneered, but it seems like some grandmasters are guarding this sea. We can bypass this area and sneak into the middle of the mortals. By then, no one will know our origins. Cackle, ha 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 ha. In the depths of the dark and mysterious ocean where no one could see, horrifying demons shot out in all directions like ghosts. Meanwhile, on the island on the back of the huge heaven-devouring turtle, Black Demon said, "We've broken through their blockage with the stealth spell and the teleport skill from Diablo 2, but it seemed to alert the demon soldiers. That was why we hurried back. But I think we can send a team of cultivators who excel in stealth and teleport into the plane of ninefold darkness, and they should succeed." Meanwhile, in an extremely desolate corner in the world, heavenly thunderbolts boomed while wind and clouds surged. Several figures floated down like immortals descending to the mortal world. Is this the mortal world? One figure glanced around with a cold gaze. "My lord, we're not afraid of the mortals, but there might be a few evil demons that comes from the ninefold darkness. Please be careful," another one cautioned. In the group chat of the Cultivator Alliance I think we can't just wait for them to move first, Gatinian said. "They can descend at any time, but we can't go up any time," Nalan Hongwu said. "Unfortunately, we know nothing about the demon-slaying platform that they use to descend and have no opportunity to visit and learn from it. Then, the only way that we can pass this void and truly know that world is..." After a moment of silence, Xuanhuan Ancestral said, "I think we old guys can give it a try regardless of how dangerous it will be. Tell us your plan." Morning gradually arrived. Ow! Shen Qingqing stretched, feeling lazy in this mild weather of the early morning. It's almost summer break, right? She looked at people such as Song Qingfeng and Nalan Mingsu who entered the shop with her. After the Heavenly Academy began to give its disciples summer break and winter break, the other major academies and factions copied this practice, thinking that their elite disciples needed time to obtain experiences in the real world and be up to date. After all, they had seen from the battle at Half City that the training in virtual reality, even though it felt real, was still not the same as training in the real world. In the games, the veteran players got used to not really dying and thus were not afraid. When they encountered some unexpected situations in the real world, they experienced some negative emotions that they hadn't known before. Therefore, the major academies and factions encouraged the disciples to build foundations in the virtual worlds and then move on to real practice battles in the real world. It might not be so urgent to the senior disciples who had experienced the real world already, but it was absolutely necessary for the new disciples. It was why most of the factions and academies found it necessary to take time during the summer and winter so that the disciples could experience the real world. Do all the academies demand the disciples to go out and obtain experience? Xuanhuan and Xuanhuan chatted during their free time before playing games in the early morning. We will have graduated by that time. Xuanhuan and Xuanhuan were senior sisters to the students in Song Qingfeng's year. Having known them in the shop for many years, they were very close. Lan Yan said, "It's this year." "Oh, I have poor memory." They looked embarrassed and amused. "Sister Qing, do you have other plans?" While making a bowl of instant noodles, Song Qingfeng sat down on a couch casually. Having been in the shop for years, they felt at home here. Writer of the official novels, the shop owner is using your great talents for this small job. I think it's fine for me to be an official novel writer. Xuanhuan loved stories. I like this job, but what plans do you guys have after graduation? I plan to tour around for a while, Song Qingfeng said. I'll make plans after that. In fact, if they were not now playing online games or were just casual players, taking some time off occasionally would have little impact. After all, in most games, the players didn't fight each other in the first encounter as they did in The Legend of Mir 2, therefore, there were many casual players. While eating instant noodles, Song Qingfeng asked Nalan Mingsu casually, "Junior mistress, how about you? After graduation, I'll take over some family businesses. I plan to pursue some new business opportunities," Nalan Mingsu said. New business opportunities. Everyone looked at her curiously. Yeah? She took out her communication jade and clicked on a strange-looking icon, which looked like a smirk face emoji with a big open mouth. There was a dot in front of the mouth. Isn't it a small gaming zone? Song Qingfeng said in surprise. Pac-Man? But it looks a bit different. Yeah, Nalan Mingsu said solemnly. I've been talking with the UI Taoist Alliance about the feasibility of developing games on the communication jade. We plan to produce a kind of communication jade especially for playing games. I plan to name these games mobile games. Mobile games? Surprised, the others said, it's a good idea, but if people are in the internet cafe, who'd play on the communication jade? After all, the rich people would choose to play in the shop, and those who couldn't afford to play in the shop would have no money to buy this device, which was surely not cheap. If such fun stuff had appeared before the shop owner opened the shop, I think us young people would have loved playing it, but now. Song Qingfeng shrugged. It can only be used to kill time. I agree. Nalan Mingsu frowned. The others looked speechless. Then, why are you still doing it? You'll lose money unless you can find people who are wealthy but can't play the games in the shops. But do you think such people exist in the world? Do they exist? Nalan Mingsu looked up at the sky subconsciously. I think they might exist. For example. The others followed her gaze up to the sky. Their hearts lurched, and cold sweat popped out as they whispered, "Are you serious?" Then, they looked at the sky. Your imagination is out of control. I even have a name for it. Nalan Mingsu's usually cold face now had a bright smile. It will be called Journey. What do you think of it? I'll ask the shop owner to check the final product. I don't think it's a long shot. Aren't you afraid of losing money? Things like this can't guarantee 100% success, Nalan Mingsu said. Check what? What are you talking about? At this moment, Mr. Fang came over and sat down. We have a new game today, don't you want to check it out? On the small blackboard were the big words dash. God of War. Chapter 873, Mysterious Gift Bag for Mythological TV Series. The system is 60% upgraded. The expansion of Wrath of the Lich King is released. Energy crystals are in a shortage, and the system is upgrading slowly. What? Mr. Fang froze. Although he could only take a percentage of the income of crystals each day, he could calculate that the crystals and magic crystals that the shops earned was a very large number. But the damn system claims that it is in shortage of crystals. Seeing the system upgrade progressing as slow as a turtle and had almost stopped, Mr. Fang was at a loss for words. At this moment, Mr. Fang received a new task. System upgrade task: acquire many energy crystals. Task description: be a truly excellent shop owner and earn as much money as you can. Task reward: mysterious gift bag of a mythological TV series, contains the TV series activation right and a treasure from it. Mythological TV series, what myth is it? Mr. Fang looked puzzled. A thought dawned on him, but he didn't know if he was right about it. Forget it, whatever. He needed to consider how to make more money. At this moment, Mr. Fang's system interface showed God of War series is open. You obtained the task to sell God of War game series. As with the previous series such as Assassin's Creed and Harry Potter, the activation of the later games in the God of War series depended on the sales of the previous games. The sequels of the old series were still being released steadily with a stable number of players and viewers. For example, the Brotherhood members such as Assassin Elena and Harrison in the Kanglan City shop had played each game in the Assassin's Creed series many times. At this moment, the shops released the new games God of War 1 and God of War 2 at the same time. God of War 3 and God of War 4 would be activated after the sales of the previous two games reached a certain target. Perhaps it was because the God of War series had been acquired from the system gift bag that had an excellent quality, or that the number of players had grown even larger lately. Mr. Fang was surprised when he saw the target set for the series. The subsequent task is easy to do. It only needs 5,000 activations. Not to mention the old shops in Jua City and Half City. Even the new shop attracted players from all over the world with at least 80,000 players each day, making the less than 50,000 computers in the shop not enough despite the multiple folding spaces. Mr. Fang thought that 5,000 activations were easy to reach. Should I open a few more branch shops? Mr. Fang wondered. For example, he could open one in the Orc Kingdom and send Merlin from the Kanglan City shop to recruit a group of orcs to help manage the new shop there. Perhaps he could open the branch shop in the Lianshan Principality, which had been the battleground where they fought the Shadow Legion. By doing that, he could divert a large group of customers. Besides, some old shops could have branch shops. Li Yuya and the others had trained some good employees for him in the past years. With them watching over the old shops, Fang Chi could send the experienced employees to manage the new shops for a while. While thinking about these issues, Mr. Fang rubbed his brows. It was no wonder that Fang Chi didn't get involved in other issues. After all, he had been an esports guy instead of a talented manager before he traveled through space. He was the right person to play games, live stream, and organize esports events, when he had time. He could even give planned surprise events. But now, he was overwhelmed by the management of his internet cafes, not to mention that he needed time to play games and increase his strength. If he forced himself to do more than these things, he would bungle them. At this moment, Nalan Mingsu brought over 2 lapis cups and poured Fang Chi a cup of iced red tea. Want me to do something? Mr. Fang asked. How do you know? Nalan Mingsu poured herself a cup as well. I've known you for many years now. Mr. Fang picked up the cup of iced red tea and sipped it casually. If you treat me to iced red tea without asking for a favor from me, I'd suspect that you are a demonic god in disguise. Nalan Mingsu was at a loss for words. Very busy? Nalan Mingsu tilted her head and looked at him while asking. Seeing that Mr. Fang was about to stand up, Nalan Mingsu said, I do need to ask a favor from you. No one else can do it. I must tell you first that I won't do anything too troublesome, Mr. Fang said, or anything that needs too much thinking. For now, I won't do fights either. Besides, what do you need me to do? I don't need you to do those things. Hearing Mr. Fang's words, Nalan Mingsu said with confidence, we have people to do the troublesome stuff. I'll do the things that needs thinking. As for fighting, When have I ever asked you to fight anyway? As for your last question, it's something about making money. Mr. Fang chugged the iced red tea and put the empty cup on the desk. I mean. At this moment, the seemingly peaceful relationships between the mortal world and the ninefold darkness plane as well as the godly realm were full of hidden currents. Ever since those two realms were defeated, they sent scouts to investigate the real situation. Meanwhile, the cultivators and warriors continued their exploration of the outside world and the new realms, those gods and demons that had only existed in the ancient legends. What kind of worlds were they living in? When the cultivators began to turn their eyes out of their own world, the orbits of the three worlds began to connect. For the gods and demons who lived beyond the sky, the mortals were weak. For countless years, they received the worship of these weak creatures who begged for mercy and kindness from them, just like the rolling godly mountains where the godly palace was. Some of the existences far beyond mortals were born after the heavens were formed, and some were born even before the heavens appeared. Since the very ancient times, they had ruled over this heaven and earth. The gods who were born before the heavens were unrivaled existences and were born with the right to enjoy godly power for eternity. It was the same in the innumerable immortal sea and the godly palace. They lived on the tall godly mountains and looked down on the beings below them. In every respect, they were the perfect and greatest existences in the world. The innumerable immortal sea was defeated just like this. On the continuous godly mountains that had existed for an eternity and survived countless catastrophes, there was the vast godly nation where the loftiest gods lived. With her brown hair pulled up in a ponytail and dressed in dark red armor, she turned her perfect exquisite face to the golden light which was falling from the mountaintop, looking like a heroic godly statue that was gilded in gold. Different from other gods, the god of radiant light was a descendant of an ancient god clan. Isabella, the young Valkyrie, was the last one born in the world and also possessed great godly power. It's nothing to worry about, after all. Wondrous spell High Holiness, enabled immortal in the innumerable immortal sea, is insignificant in the godly court. Behind her stood a priestess dressed in a pure white priest robe. No matter what, I'll know after I try it in person. She looked determined. I hope my opponents won't disappoint me. U''LL. Descend in person. At this moment, Mr. Fang was standing in the cultivation room with the golden hoop trod in his hand as golden lights bloomed in front of him. An extremely huge hand slowly pressed down in the golden light. FCK. Instantly, his vision blacked out. Synchronization was over. The great sage, heaven's equal, synchronization rate, 0.6326%, increased by 0.0002% in this cultivation session. Tathagata Buddha, synchronization rate, 0.6326%, increased by 0.0002% in this cultivation session. Do you want to continue? Yes. Chapter 874, The First Experience in God of War. Beginning. Orch. In the cultivation room, Mr. Fang controlled Sun Wukong to leap and jump. Then, the whole sky seemed to darken with thick clouds. He looked up. Boom. You were suppressed under the five-phase mountain. The cultivation session is over. It hurts so much. This cultivation is so slow. After the session, Mr. Fang glanced at the progress. After eating the immortal peach, Mr. Fang wouldn't encounter bottlenecks in the near future, but obviously, even in the cultivation room, his cultivation progress became slower. With his cultivation strength getting higher, it was no longer possible to increase his power by several realms after staying in the cultivation room for 1 to 2 years as he had done before. Oh, let's use the double coupon for the cultivation room. Mr. Fang remembered that he got a double coupon as a reward. This coupon's time limit was 5 days, which were equivalent to 5 years in the cultivation room. After cultivating 5 days in the real world or 5 years in the cultivation room, he guessed that he could acquire double the progression. The current progress was so slow that even doubling it wouldn't be that fast, but it was much better than the current speed. After all, training in the cultivation room meant taking all kinds of beatings. If he used the double coupon, he would be spared of years of beating. Do you want to use the double coupon? On the system interface, Fang Chi chose to use it now. The coupon is successfully used. The double effect is now in effect. The 5-year cultivation time now increased to 10 years, and the time that passes in the real world is still 5 days. Fang Chi? 5 years and 10 years, where's the double progression? Before Fang Chi could finish, a mountain-like hand pressed down. Ah! Dot. Meanwhile, in the Kanglan City shop dash. It seems like the shop owner is quite busy lately. We don't see him much these days. I wonder what he's busy doing. Some elves, knights, and assassins sat together in a small zone on the left of the entrance. Booth-like seats and soft couches were very comfortable. They each had a mug of cappuccino on the desk. Oh, I don't have enough money now. I must do more quests. With long lifespans and great talents in battle skills and arts, the elves were usually not as busy as humans, but now, I always feel like I've become broke recently. Elf girl Salah had tears on her face. In groups of 2s and 3s, the figures looking like aristocrats and officials in some empires sat in the private compartments. In contrast, the Saint-level masters such as Sword Saint Wilson and World Mage Hematon sat wherever they could find seats due to being late all the time. It wasn't unusual for them to sit with the local residents of Kanglan City. It proved that the truly smart people always abided by the rules set by the shop owner. As for the less smart people, they were handled by other passionate customers without troubling the shop owner. Fang Chi did his best to keep the harmony in his shops, and everything went smoothly in each shop. Have you bought the newly released God of War? In the booth by the aisle, Salah and Rowling sat in the row opposite to their captain and another male elf. Salah controlled her blood elf warrior character to do quests on the Borean tundra with great leisure while reading the storyline and enjoying the scenery. Not yet. Rowling said on the side. The person sitting opposite to us is playing it. Elf Queen Kellybull plunked down on the couch beside Salah with a bag of potato chips in her arms. Then, she glanced at the screen across from the aisle. Huh? You can't find a seat? Salah put down her virtual reality headset and glanced around. It's a shame that the shop owner doesn't put thousands of new computers in the shop. I have business to handle in a few hours, but I've got to wait in line. Kellybull tore open the bag in a huff. I'll watch it for a while first, but how come God of Wars that they are playing look different from one another? There are God of War 1 and God of War 2. I think they are not playing the same one, Rowling said while playing World of Warcraft. Across from the aisle, the elves could see a black dragon head that was wearing a virtual reality headset. Nearby was a grey-haired old man dressed in a mage's robe and an aristocrat-looking middle-aged man dressed in solemn clothes. They were Saint-level masters such as Black Dragon Gulf, Wilson, and Streetleton. Some of them were indeed idle, for example, a certain Black Dragon. Some had to squeeze time from their busy schedules to play games. For the Saint-level masters such as Wilson, this game was indeed more fitting for them than Journey to the West. Of course, nearby, young people like Ron and Joseph who were about 14 years old were also trying this new game. This guy looks so ugly. Sitting beside the elves, Kellybull ate potato chips and watched the person across from her play God of War. On the screen was an ocean of blazing flames, looking like the catastrophe at the end of the world. It showed half of a man's face which looked grand, gloomy, and pale, with a strange red mark. Other than gloominess, this face emitted a presence full of bloody fierceness and aggression. Obviously, many people were playing God of War 1. Kellybull thought that this main character was ugly. Besides, he is also bald. Why does he look so murderous? As a peace-loving elf, she obviously didn't like this game. But since she had nothing to do while waiting in line, she continued to watch. Let's choose. New game. Streetleton chuckled. As a knight, he liked the main character who was obviously a melee fighter. Of course, obviously, you can't choose, load, right? Beside him, World Mage Hematon glanced over. Is this that god of war? The young players also exclaimed, he looks powerful. The scene of flames dimmed and was replaced by a grey mountaintop, but the man was still the same one as before. This scene would probably remain in the memories of the players for a long time. The gods of Olympus have abandoned me. As the deep voice spoke, the view zoomed out and showed that Kratos stood alone on the edge of the cliff on the high mountain, looking like a hero who had aged. Now there is no hope. Kratos leapt down from the mountaintop. He didn't look like a god, he was more like a mortal who had been cornered by gods and thus embarked on the last journey to end everything. After all, Kratos was a mortal at the beginning. The scene changed with the narration, but it had not always been this way. Kratos had once been a champion of the gods. Time returned to the past. After only a dozen seconds or so, a tragic and indignant atmosphere engulfed the players. From a mortal to the god of war, the curtain of this man's life was lifted. Chapter 875. The beginning of slaying gods. Different from most of the previous games, God of War had 3 difficulty level: Mortal, Spartan, and God. The difficulty setting was necessary. After all, the enemies in God of War were real gods, not minor gods but the 12 Olympians, the 12 major deities. In the previous games, other than Dark Souls, which no one had passed yet, there had been few battles against opponents above the peak level of humans. Even almighty Demon Lord Chonglu had lowered his strength to the upper limit of humans when he battled King Tan. However, in God of War, the system created this world with an ultimate difficulty level. Without lowering the difficulty through the difficulty levels, many players would never be able to handle the enemies in this game. Although God of War and Dark Souls both revolved around legends, they had different core elements. Besides, when the players couldn't pass Dark Souls, they could invite friends with ultimate skills to help them with rewards and work together. However, this practice couldn't be used in God of War, which was why the system version of God of War had designed several levels of difficulty. At this moment, Elf Queen Kelly ate potato chips as she watched several players enter the game. Even the Saint-level masters were discussing, perhaps, let's choose the second difficulty level. Frightened by the difficulty of Dark Souls, they immediately chose the Spartan difficulty level and entered the game. The story brought them back to 3 weeks before the beginning scene. With all kinds of questions on their minds, the players entered the game while feeling a sense of epicness. On the vast pitch-black sea, huge waves surged up in a violent storm as if some horrifying demons were running havoc in the depths of the sea. The huge shipwreck on the shore was full of monsters from the underworld. It was close to the shore, but the sea under the cliff was unfathomable. Suddenly, a huge head of a horrifying monster appeared before them. It was a huge snake head. More horrifying was that countless giant snake bodies coiled on the deep ocean bottom. It was the monster only existing in myths, the Hydra. In other words, the weakest monster that the players faced from the very beginning of the game was a monster from the myths. What's this? Is this person going to fight that snake monster? Elf Queen Kelly ate potato chips as she watched the scene in surprise. In such a stormy ocean, a human would certainly die if he had to fight such a horrifying sea monster. Furthermore, its true form was yet to be revealed from the ocean. The Saint-level masters who were playing the highest God difficulty level encountered lots of dangers within the first minute of the game. Almost no weapon could inflict damage on the extremely hard scales of this monster. The blades of chaos were dual short blades forged in the foulest depths of Hades. The main character, Kratos, in God of War had the dual blades in his hands. The Saint-level players could feel the weapon's omnipresent horrifying power when they held the 2 blades. But even such a weapon couldn't do much damage on the 9-headed sea serpent. With great efforts, the players could only force back one of its heads. My goodness! How come they have to fight such a big boss at the very beginning of the game? Elf Queen Kellybull said from behind, can they defeat it? At this moment, Kratos was not its match, but don't forget that at this time, Kratos was also a champion of the gods, which meant that he had the 12 major Olympian gods behind him. After defeating one of the Hydra's heads, Kratos finally came to the depths of the extremely huge ship. A blinding blue godly light lit up as a giant god's face appeared before them. Everyone shook involuntarily. Even though it was only a shadow, the players could feel the vast godly power of the god behind the shadow. This was Poseidon, the lord of the seas. This god was worshipped by all the humans who survived with the resources from the ocean. Lord Poseidon. Kratos showed due respect. The bright blue face looked like surging ocean water, and one seemed to see endless ocean in it. Kratos, before you reach Athens, there is a task you must complete. This beast is Hydra, it has terrorized my seas for far too long. Your skills are admirable, but you will need assistance. You will need the power of the gods. Accept this godly power. In the next moment, the whole world turned into an illusion. The entire heaven and earth seemed to have transformed into a great ocean. In the vast surging godly power, horrifying godly thunderbolts crashed down from the sky and encircled around Kratos like snakes or dragons. Like the thunder god, he was bathed in godly thunderbolts. Following the ancient rules, it transformed into a god's wrath and turned everything around it into ashes. This was the magic power given by Poseidon, the lord of the seas, Poseidon's rage. This magic power. While Kellybull stared at the magic power with widened eyes, the players such as Streetselden were also stupefied. Different from the character who was born with no power in Dark Souls, the players in God of War felt like they had the ability to destroy the heavens and earth. Magic power. World Mage Hematon almost danced as his eyes burned with maniac-like heat. I feel the power of the spell. This is real magic. Is this the magic power that gods can unleash? Let me get familiar with this god-level magic spell, I think. Hematon controlled Kratos, and his expression had never looked so dominant before. Indeed, the players had been extremely cautious when they fought with one of the heads of the Hydra. Now, when they encountered an attack that they couldn't dodge, they could just block it head-on with Poseidon's rage. Yes, a small mortal could fight with a mythical monster head-on. I feel like I'm unrivaled. Hematon laughed and said, this game is so cool, so cool. Soon, he got familiar with how to use Poseidon's rage. When one head of the huge Hydra bit at him with fierceness, thunderbolts appeared like dragons as the horrifying godly power exploded in the form of godly thunderbolts like a god's wrath. The Hydra's huge head couldn't break through this godly power. Instead, it was forced back dozens of meters as the thunderbolts almost shattered its sharp fangs. Ha 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 ha. He laughed wildly. If he could master this magic spell in the real world, then... Behind him, Elf Queen Kellybull lost her composure as she watched this great power. The saint-level masters such as Hematon laughed wildly as they played. With such godly power, who can stop me in this world? This game isn't difficult at all. In a while, I'll try the god difficulty level. Yeah, I even chose the Spartan difficulty level. With such godly power, it's child's play to kill these small monsters. At this moment, an almighty god shadow materialized before them in the storm. Kratos, your next task is to kill Ares, the god of war. Okay, it's easy. What? Everyone fell silent instantly. Poseidon, the lord of the seas, Ares, the god of war. How come the names sound a bit similar? Whom do you want me to kill? Chapter 876, Descend. Different from the heroes in most of the mythological stories, Kratos wasn't an orthodox hero. His behavior showed the mercilessness and indifference towards these Olympian gods. Once a leader of an army of Spartans, who were famous for their strength and bravery, Kratos was courageous and vicious. Defeated in a battle, he begged for help from Ares, the god of war. He received Ares' help and defeated his enemies at the price of servitude under Ares by signing a covenant, killing countless humans and gods. He became Ares' puppet and killing machine, a powerful warrior who was serving the gods. After that, he killed countless gods and humans. To make him into a perfect warrior, Ares set up a trap and made him kill his own wife and daughter, with the ashes of his wife and daughter covering his body, causing Kratos' skin to become pale gray. He was cursed with constant nightmares, reliving the scenes of that day. This curse made him into an even more cold-blooded warrior who lived only for battles and revenge. The Hydra ran havoc in the cities close to the shore as the monsters from the underworld butchered humans at will. Gods said they would send a warrior to rescue them. No, the gods were only annoyed by the disturbances of the troublesome fierce beasts in their back garden, so they sent a qualified warrior to clear them. As for rescuing the mortals, it wasn't their concern. Kratos, trained by Ares, the god of war, wouldn't show any mercy to them. It was why all kinds of human soldiers died in the hand of the monsters when Kratos killed the Hydra. God of War depicted a world under the gods' rule. It looked orderly on the surface but was in fact chaotic and gloomy. Therefore, it was natural that someone would try to drag these gods off their shrine. The deaths of his wife and daughter woke up Kratos, and he decided to seek revenge by slaying the gods. Meanwhile, he hoped that this would compensate for the crimes that he had committed and get rid of the endless curse and nightmares which haunted him for countless days and nights. He asked Athena and the other gods for help, which led to the scene before them. After killing the Hydra, the storm on the ocean turned even more violent. Rain poured down like a waterfall. I have faithfully served the gods for 10 years, when will you relieve me of these nightmares? We request one final task of you, Kratos. On the gloomy ocean, the statue of Athena looked solemn and grand. As we speak, Athens is on the verge of destruction. It is the will of Ares, my great city falls, but Zeus has forbidden the gods from waging war on each other. Complete this final task, and the past that consumes you will be forgiven. Have faith, Kratos, the gods do not forget those who come to their aid. This was Kratos' new task, slaying a god. He must kill Ares, the god of war who schemed to overthrow Zeus's ruling and was attacking Athens. The storm lessened, and dark clouds gradually dispersed in the sky above the vast ocean, revealing a full moon that looked like a silver plate. With the goddess's words still echoing in his ears, Kratos continued forward on his huge battleship. In the past 10 years, he had engaged in countless wars while riding this battleship. Perhaps this was the last journey. His biggest test and the chance to return from the edge of craziness was in the grand city of Athens in front of him. At this moment, people seemed to see hope in his eyes. At this moment, all the players remembered the scene at the beginning and thought that perhaps he would obtain the victory in this great battle of slaying a major god. But, the more they thought of it, the more tragic the story would be in the eyes of the people who were watching or playing the game. Under the gazes of the gods, the ending that was waiting for this hero wouldn't be the one that he wanted. Like the god of war, the legendary life of this man who was struggling on the verge of insanity began. This game seems intriguing. While eating potato chips, Elf Queen Kellybull watched from behind and seemed to be hooked by the story. Is it interesting? Nearby, some elves asked. Yeah, warriors can fight the monsters in melee combats, and mages can use magic spells, Kellybull commented. I wonder what happens to the man. Will he die? Remembering the last scene, she continued watching without thinking. Really? Salah said, then, let's activate God of War later, after I level up once. I'll play it for a while. Kellybull's face darkened as she had the urge to beat these elves. Can't you let me, your queen, play for a while? She wished that she could grab the seat from one of the elves. Of course, as an elegant and noble elf queen, she wouldn't put her thought into action. After all, she didn't want to expose her true identity yet. Even if she did, she wouldn't do such a disgraceful thing. Therefore, Kellybull could do nothing but to sit behind and watch the elves play with widened eyes. Then, she sometimes glanced at the person sitting across the island playing God of War. She concentrated on being a bystander. Higher. With a loud yell, Streetledon controlled Kratos to tear a monster into pieces with his bare hands. Ha ha, this man is so powerful. Boom. As thunderbolts crashed, the mages activated Poseidon's rage and learned the method of using the godly power. Oh, if only I could combine one tiny bit of this technique into my magic spells, it would be a huge magic revolution. Adolf, the white-robed mage, yelled. It's hard to imagine, by that time, our magic spells would make a noticeable leap forward. At this moment, the city of Athens was full of countless horrifying demons. They were not as giant or as powerful as the Hydra, but there were many of them. Having served the Olympian gods for countless years, Kratos had fought with many monsters and even gods whose strength far surpassed his own. That was how he obtained lots of battle experience and combat techniques. With abundant experience and skills, he looked like a war machine working with great accuracy. We can learn new magic spells? Kellybull watched as the players encountered a shadow cast by a new god. This god said that we can learn the spell, Medusa's Gaze, which can turn people to stone, after we kill Medusa. The players said curiously, what's so powerful about Medusa's Gaze? Meanwhile, in the radiant light godly nation, a holy golden light fell from the vast sky. Princess Isabella was bathed in the holy godly light beam. This is the descent of a heavenly god. It's the descent of a heavenly god. Countless followers worshipped on their knees below the godly palace. It's the descent of a heavenly god. Chapter 877, Kun Hunter Champion? UI Taoist Alliance Dash. The current UI Taoist Alliance was many times grander than before. Engulfed in pale blue spiritual lights, spiritual ships landed while cultivators poured out. They were either artifact masters from all over the world coming here to study or cultivators from different factions for visits. As the Cultivator Alliance closest to Geocity, it had gradually developed to a new height. At this moment, Mr. Fang sat in the conference room with Xuanhuan, who was now a key figure among the younger generation of artifact masters in the UI Taoist Alliance. What do you intend to make? Xuanhuan handed Mr. Fang a brand new communication jade. When Mr. Fang turned it on, he saw extremely clear spiritual spell visual projection appearing on it. The size and position of the visual can be adjusted. But if the quality of the communication jade was poor, the visuals would appear fuzzy after they were enlarged. This is simple, Nalan Minksu said. It's like the small and mini games in Xzone. I plan to ask the artifact masters to make some easy ones to practice on. After we make more products and obtain more experience, we can advance to some more complicated designs. This one is an example. Nalan Minksu took out a communication jade. One could see the extremely complex array engravings in the translucent jade body. On the bottom right corner was a tiny and thin storage jade slip. As spiritual energy circulated in it, pale spiritual lights gathered above the communication jade and then condensed into a simple picture. On the picture was a round ball that looked like the smirk face emoji. It turned its head and ate a dot beside it. Pac-Man. Obviously, it mimicked the mini-game in Xzone. In surprise, Mr. Fang watched the cultivators and warriors play Pac-Man and talk about their experience in the game. At this moment, in the innumerable immortal sea dash. In the ethereal and vast immortal sea, there stood countless immortal islands and cities. Although the number of immortals was much lower than the number of mortals, they looked quite prosperous after countless years of management by the major families. The 8 big families each had their own immortal mountains, cave abodes, and immortal islands where immortals from different places gathered. Many immortal residences and jade buildings stood in a courtyard. At this moment, wondrous spell High Holiness stood on this jade immortal platform and looked down on the views below in all directions. Dao Hearing Pavilion was where the Gui family taught immortal Dao. Right now, a couple of mentors and many disciples sat in here. When the bell rang, disciples from different families walked out in twos and threes. Humphrey, with the great reputation of our immortal families, who dares to not bow to us? Why should I learn the so-called immortal spells? It's just a pile of useless stuff. One flippant young master walked out of the pavilion while cussing. What then? Beside him, a pale-faced young master with triangle-shaped eyes said arrogantly, "With my great background, I, Yan King, still have to stay here obediently. Pooh, I'm bored to death seeing this stuff. The people in our families are so stupid. As immortals, we enjoy extremely long lives, but we have to do all this boring stuff instead of finding some entertainment to kill time. Brother Yan, should we?" The flippant young master rubbed his hands together as his expression changed. He said, "How about going to the Green Conch Immortal Realm for fun? I'm tired of it. It offers just those few things to do. Then, let's go to Immortal Sea Golden Palace." "Get out, I don't want to go. With so many immortal spells and immortal techniques, none of them can provide me with any entertainment. They know nothing but to host immortal exams or battle merit lists. What a pathetic life we're living." The UI Taoist Alliance Dash. We plan to make it into the same mode as the King of Fighters first. As the Cultivator Alliance's exploration plans are carried out, we'll sell these games to the outer world. Nalan Mingsu outlined her plans and said, "The first step is not selling these communication jades. The players must come to our shop and buy game tokens. With each token, they can play one game once." Although the main plan was mobile games, Nalan Mingsu's plan also involved an in-game purchase issue and thus couldn't sell mobile games directly. Mr. Fang thought for a moment. "There's only one game?" "Of course not. We have small games such as Knights of Valor, Oriental Legend Super, and Fish Hunter Champion, but they are all in production." With a document in her hand, Nalan Mingsu said, "Do you want to have a look? TL note, these are all popular mini-games in China." This. Mr. Fang took the document from her hand and said, "You can change the names a little bit. The Knights of Valor can be changed to Immortal of Valor, describing the war among the three immortal kingdoms of Wei, Xiu, and Wu. As for Fish Hunter Champion," Mr. Fang thought for a while and said, "You can change it into Kun Hunter Champion to suit the current situation." TL note, Kun is an imaginary large fish in Chinese mythology. You can also add a champion point list for Kun Hunter Champion. Obviously, Mr. Fang didn't have much time to play God of War, but the players were different, especially the Elf Queen who didn't have a seat and had to watch it while others played. She sat down and shared a couch with one elf before watching. The journey of slaying a god was undoubtedly very difficult. Even the countless monsters existing in the mythological era in Athens were extremely dangerous. Under the guidance of the gods, Kratos completed the quests that they gave him and increased his strength at the same time. In a big palace, Medusa with a human head and a snake's body slithered up silently. The dual blades in Kratos' hands emitted hellish flames. The players had learned the unimaginably powerful strength as well as the techniques and battle skills that could control the godly power from Kratos. Streetleton controlled Kratos to bend his back slightly before throwing out the chain blade abruptly at a great speed. Floating like a ghost, Medusa dodged the attack silently and emitted a wave of blinding light from her eyes. As everyone knows, light moves extremely fast and is almost impossible to dodge. One can only handle it by prediction. Even at the Spartan difficulty level, which was much easier, he could only manage to put up some slight defense before being turned into stone. Even with Kratos' godly power, almost instantly, this saint-level player controlled Kratos to lunge to one side and landed in the blind spot of Medusa's vision. Like a shadow, Medusa's gaze followed him. He leapt over her head and dodged the light of Medusa's gaze at the same time. But at this moment, the light swept up. Crack! Kratos turned into stone before falling and shattering. This magic spell is also powerful. Kellyble grabbed the arm of the elf sitting beside her and exclaimed, "Wow, that mage seems to have mastered this spell. Look, look, he turned several monsters into stone. Ah, my goodness, look at that person. Did he encounter the god of war?" Kellyble shook Elf Girl Rolling's arm. On the Saint Level Master's screen which she was pointing at, there was an extremely giant god whose head touched the endless starry sky while the feet stepped on the vast land and mountains. This god was leading his army into the city of Athens. Then, Kellyble turned her head and met Rolling's murderous eyes. On Rolling's screen, the Kratos that she controlled couldn't be more dead. Meanwhile, one of Rolling's arms was still being shaken by Kellyble. On the screen, Kratos' arm that was holding a blade was also shaking violently. The chain blade had been thrown to somewhere unknown. Dot. Dot. Meanwhile, in the radiant light godly nation, I hear that some demonic gods in the mortal world are very good with their battle skills. The Valkyrie smiled with great self-confidence. I hope the rumor is true. At this moment, even Street Hinds looked respectful. Everything is ready. When would you like to set off, my lady? I think now is a good time. At this moment, Street Dylan knelt and kowtowed while saying, "We're very pious and hope that we can have the opportunity to witness your godly power." Okay, come with me. Yes. Chapter 878. Damn it, sir. Do you have other games in which we can slay gods? In God of War 1, the rebellion of Ares, the god of war, shook the authority of the Olympian gods. Now that they had found a man who was set on seeking revenge from Ares, the other gods naturally gave him their full support, urging him on with encouragements. To show their support, each god gave Kratos great powers. The powers included spells such as Poseidon's Rage, Medusa's Gaze, Army of Hades, and even Zeus's Fury, which allowed him to summon thunderbolts like that of Zeus, the king of the gods. At this moment, the players in the Kanglan City shop were thrilled with the game. The cent-level players said in excitement, "Look what I found. Zeus, the king of the gods. Wow!" Others all stood behind him and watched as an extremely huge god face filled the screen. Kratos, you grow stronger as your journey continues, but if you are to succeed in your quest, you will need my aid. I offer you the power of the greatest of all the gods, the father of Olympus. I'll grant you Zeus' fury. On the screen, Kratos held a holy golden lightning bolt which represented the pinnacle power of the Olympian gods. Bursting out from Kratos' palm, the lightning bolt contained the ancient pure law of thunder and lightning. There's such a power. Is this also a magic spell? Oh, can you feel it? I dare to say that this is the purest ultimate magic spell in the world. Mage Adolf laughed and said, "Oh, ha ha ha, can you feel it? This is the origin." Sitting beside him, Swain opened his mouth and said, "This is the true original power of the father of Olympus. If anyone can understand one trace of this power, his magic skill will instantly rise to a new level. Yes. Let's get into the battles. Oh ha 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 ha. Let's play it too." Beside them, Elf Girl Salah and the other elves also clicked on God of War, which they had just bought. No. Having waited for a long time but still not able to get a computer, Kellyble's face darkened. "Don't you have work to do in the elf forest in a while? Rolling, I remember that you're on duty this afternoon." Kellyble pointed at one of the elves and said loudly, "Huh? How do you know about that?" Surprised, Rolling looked at the elf wanderer who always played games with them. She said sulkily, "What should I do? I must stop playing soon." She mumbled, "Should I ask for a leave?" The moment she said that, she took out her communication jade and wondered, "Huh? The captain sent me a message? Why did the captain send a message at this moment?" While mumbling to herself, she opened the message which said, "Miss Rolling, I heard that you want to ask for leave because you want to play games this afternoon. Hey, I haven't done it yet. I didn't ask for leave yet. I didn't." Her beautiful eyes glanced around. "What's happening? Who told on me? At this moment, Kellybull was secretly pleased on the side. Higher, I'll finally get to play the game. At this moment, a white-robed and white-bearded figure stood behind her. Ahem, ahem. First Elder Haru. Kellybull turned around, looking embarrassed. Your Majesty, First Elder Haru said to her with a voice transmission spell, may I ask when you'll return to the elf forest and handle the affairs? 3 minutes later, the elves found that the elf wanderer who had been sitting beside them and watching them play was replaced by a white-haired old elf. They looked surprised. Huh? When did they do the switch? Besides these powerful magic spells and power, the biggest attractions of God of War for the players were the story that was full of twists and dangers and the extremely powerful mythological enemies they encountered. Even the pinnacle stage saint-level masters felt a sense of destiny and epicness, feeling as if the continuous mythological chapters were waiting for them to unveil. The players at the East Continent might only feel the novelty and enjoyment of doing swift and victorious battles, but the players at the West Continent felt different. They felt much more. The grand and ancient city of Athens, the endless deadly desert, the gods guiding the way and granting powers, the titans enslaved and hidden in the desert, the Pandora's box with endless power hidden in it. The world seemed to have just been created from the chaos and was full of horrifying monsters and unknown dangers. It was also full of countless opportunities. For the players at the West Continent, this game depicted a world that was closer to the prehistoric mythology in their minds. Some players controlled Kratos to venture deep into the deadly desert with endless yellow winds and looking like an abyss of sand. After countless battles with monsters, they finally came before the Titan who carried a giant mountain on its back. Climbing up the sharp cliff and coming to the godly palace on the mountain top by stepping on countless previous travelers' corpses, the players felt like they were writing a new mythology chapter in person. It felt wonderful. But the journey of slaying a god wasn't so simple. At this moment, Ares, the god of war, seemed to have sensed this scene from tens of thousands of miles away. He casually pulled up a stone pillar from the city of Athens and threw it out. In the deadly desert far away, Kratos was about to open the Pandora's box when the stone pillar pinned him onto the godly palace's walls. He died instantly. Then, Kratos crawled back from the underworld and came before Pandora's box again, finally gaining the power inside it. After receiving the powers granted by the gods and the remaining power in Pandora's box, he finally was qualified to battle Ares. They didn't know how much time passed and how many dangers they had experienced. Even at the Spartan difficulty level, the players moved forward with great difficulty. At the end of the story, Kratos killed Ares, the god of war, and saved the Olympian gods from falling, finishing the almost impossible mission. At this moment, all the players watched as Kratos went to Athena and asked her to fulfill the god's promise to him so that he could get rid of the nightmare that had taunted him for many years. In the nightmare, he relived the moment of killing his wife and daughter by mistake. Looking at the goddess before them, for some reason, the players who had gone through the difficult journey or those who had come to watch this part had an ominous feeling. We promised your sins would be forgiven, and so they are. The voice in the screen said, but we never promised to take away your nightmares. No man, no god could ever forget the terrible deeds you have done. That's all. All the players stared at the scene dumbfoundedly, not believing what they had heard. After going through countless hardships and finishing their mission that was impossible for mortals and perhaps gods, he got such a result. The screen returned to the scene at the beginning of the game. After dumping all the godly powers, Kratos leapt down the abyss. Only at this moment did they realize how desperate this man felt. Damn it. Streetled and jumped up in a fury. Are there other tasks of slaying gods? I'll slay these sons of beaches. There are. Buy God of War 2 and God of War 3, and you'll get to kill all Olympian gods. At this moment, Mr. Fang passed by their zone and said, ? The saint-level masters froze. Huh? Sir, I'll buy them. Me too. Let's team up and slay the gods. Let's go. Damn it. I'll buy one as well. Today, I'll slay these sons of beaches. Ting, the sales of God of War 1, God of War 2, and God of War 3 have all exceeded 5,000. The right to sell God of War 4 is activated. Chapter 879, The God has descended. Come out and worship now. In God of War 1, the players only needed to face one of the major Olympian gods, the God of War. But in God of War 2 and God of War 3, the players must face all the major Olympian gods. At this moment, the players who had finished God of War 1 opened God of War 2 without a pause. Obviously, Kratos didn't die. Since his godly power and strength were granted and nurtured by the gods with great efforts, the Olympian gods didn't want their efforts to go to waste. Therefore, Kratos was dragged to the God of War's throne by the gods to fill the vacancy of this position. Lately, it feels like these saint-level masters have been sleeping in the internet cafe. When the elves entered the shop and saw the saint-level masters such as Streetleton, Streethemeton, and Sword Saint Wilson already sitting before the computers, they began to talk. Huh? Isn't that First Elder Hyrule? Elder Sewell of the Elf clan said in surprise. How come the First Elder is here so early too? Besides, she saw the famous saint-level masters such as the Dwarf King, Black Dragon Gulf, and the presidents of Alchemist Union and Magic Union all sitting neatly in one row. The moment that they entered the shop, they saw that the long row of chairs near the entrance had been taken by saint-level masters. They had never looked so solemn before, as if they were not playing a game but doing an extremely holy mission. They sat here last night, right? I think so. At the end of God of War 1, Kratos had irreconcilable conflicts with the gods. Of course, the gods were not stupid. At the beginning of God of War 2, Zeus pretended to loan his Blade of Olympus to Kratos and tricked the latter to put all his godly power into the sword. In the next moment, Zeus pierced Kratos with the Blade of Olympus. In the past, the gods had regarded the death of Kratos as a waste of the godly powers that they had granted him, but now, after they retrieved all his powers, they thought it wasn't a big deal to kill him. If the previous hatred only turned Kratos cold inside, then being tricked by the gods repeatedly ignited a surging fury inside him and the world that the gods ruled. Obviously, someone didn't want Kratos to die, and this someone was one of the titans that ruled the world before being overthrown by the Olympian gods, Gaia, the mother of Earth. So, he was resurrected again and killed his way to Mount Olympus under her guidance. In the internet cafe, I've f***ing killed my way out of the underworld. How about you guys? Streetleton roared while playing the game. Don't you see me riding a Pegasus? Streethemeton yelled as he brandished his chain blade. On his screen, countless monsters flying out of the vast ocean of clouds lunged at him and were butchered one by one. This mage can even use the chain blades. The elves looked dumbfounded, wondering what these people had experienced in the game. On their journey, they saw Prometheus, who was cursed by the gods. He was the god who had brought fire to mankind in an effort to help the humans. Zeus had Prometheus chained to a boulder on Caucasus Mountains and let a hungry and fierce eagle feed on his organs each day. How pathetic it was. Today, I haven't reached Mount Olympus yet. March on. On the next day, the elves entered the shop and again saw the saint-level masters sitting in a row. These people. Higher. Damn it. Die. On the third day. Pooh, damn it. Kill this son of a BTCH. Die. The elves who had just entered the shop wondered, how come they are still playing the game? On the fourth day. On the fifth day. On the sixth day. On there. Sir, activate God of War 3 for me. First Elder Hyrule looked at his scene where God of War 2 was being played. Degrees. Meanwhile, at the border of the Morning Light Empire where Kanglan City was close to Dash. On a tall watchtower, a mage rubbed his eyes and seemed to see a streak of golden light on the horizon. Immediately, he cast the Eagle Eye spell on himself, but in the next moment, He saw countless warriors dressed in radiant light war armor and godly palaces that were hovering in the air suddenly appearing before the city. In disbelief, all the people on watchtowers rubbed their eyes. When they looked again, the restriction ray outside the city wall had been destroyed. Before they could react, the godly palaces were hovering above their heads. They looked like a miracle summoned by gods. Perhaps this horrifying sight could only be explained with miracles. Judgment Godly Palace, what do you want? Presences guarding the city surged up as a voice resonated in the sky like thunder. We're here to arrest heretics. A huge dragon spread its wings and almost covered the entire sky above this border city. Street Hinds sat on the huge dragon with great confidence and pride. Morning Light Empire, Elf Kingdom, Orc Kingdom, Dwarf Kingdom, you shelter the heretics and will receive the same punishment as them, kill, suppression. It was a one-sided massacre. After all, how could ordinary troops resist an army blessed by the gods? In the royal palace of the Morning Light Empire report, the Radiant Light Legion launched a surprise attack on the west region of our nation, and 13 cities fell. Report, 19 cities have fallen. Report. As the reports came one after another, only about half an hour had passed. The Radiant Light Legion has reached Kanglan City. The voice contained endless horror and fear. Such military traveling speed went beyond the human's scope of knowledge. At this moment, endless godly light shot into Kanglan City as over 10 godly palaces and the Radiant Light Legion swarmed up from all directions, surrounding the entire city so tightly that even water couldn't leak out. The elites of Radiant Light Legion surrounded the Kanglan City shop like an iron bucket. I finally get to see this day. Draped in a pure white mage's robe, Street Dylan hovered in the air as he was supported by an invisible force. Engulfed in faint godly light, he looked down like a god. He had endured endless disgrace and shame. He had even executed Luther and some other Judgment Godly Palace officials whom he had promoted personally. This time, with a trembling old arm, he pushed open the transparent shop door and walked in. Seeing the prosperous sight in the shop and remembering the desolate sight inside the Judgment Godly Palace right now, he said chillily, "Come out. The god has descended." At this moment, the screens in the internet cafe show the following scenes. Street Willie dragged out the soul of Hades, the god of the underworld. Street Alden held the disembodied head of Helios, the titan god of the sun. Helen saw her father, an old sword saint, piercing the blade of Olympus into Zeus' body repeatedly. Then, they put down their virtual reality headsets and turned around. Chapter 880, What magic spell did you use? What's it? What's happening? In the Kanglan City shop, a large group of people glanced over involuntarily. What's happening? The shop clerk, Mage Merlin, also looked out of the shop and saw fully armored warriors and priests surrounding the shop in a tight circle. The presences that they emitted were horrifying, let alone the figure who walked in and was flanked by several red-robed senior priests. "You, aren't you, Street Dylan?" Merlin's expression changed. The saint-level masters of the Judgment Godly Palace had much higher combat strength than average saint-level masters. In the past thousands of years, their warriors resisting the Judgment Godly Palace had received countless bloody lessons. The true strength of the masters of the Holy Church was always greater than their rivals on the same level. The true masters among them could even communicate with gods and summon the gods' blessings to the mortal world. They had the top-level spells and combat techniques that the gods taught them. When they revealed these to the world, they were capable of far greater powers than those of pinnacle-stage saint-level masters. With such powers, they were called demigods. It was why the masters of the Judgment Godly Palace always stood over the other masters in the whole West continent. Then, the expressions of many people in the shop changed. Seeing this sight, Street Dylan was very satisfied. While spreading his hands, he seemed to be bathing in pure holy light. He who knows the situation is a wise man. The gods are gazing at this land. The old era is almost over, and the glory of the new age will soon arrive. Now representing the great and merciful gods, I give you a chance to make the choice again. Wait. What did you say? At this moment, nation-protecting Sword Saint Wilson interrupted him and asked, you said. Our empire no longer exists. Of course. While walking out of the shop slowly, Street Dylan's old face looked extremely arrogant, as if he was telling them that a great legend was about to emerge. From now on, I think all the nations on the continent don't need to exist anymore. All the people belong to one nation and are the gods' subjects. After saying so much, you still haven't told me where the gods are. Nation-protecting Sword Saint Wilson said in a cold voice. Street Dylan froze and then looked at him, bursting into laughter. You haven't seen it? Seen what? They stared at him. Seen this? While he spoke, he retreated slowly to the center of the street. In front of everyone, he showed his power by dimming the heaven and earth at will. Then, a golden heavenly light shined down from the clouds, and a surge of extremely huge power engulfed him. An invisible force slowly lifted him up into midair, as if the overwhelming force turned everything around him restless. My goodness. This force is much greater than the pinnacle stage saint level. Is it possible that? Even Street Hines, who was sitting on the huge dragon in the sky, looked down and nodded slightly. Countless masters in the Radiant Light Legion around them all looked envious and reverent, letting out shouts of surprise and joy. In the end, the shouts gathered together as their cheering became as loud as a tsunami. Congratulations to Lord Street Dylan for entering the demigod realm. Do you feel this power, now standing before you? I'm a god. Street Dylan looked down on the players who had just walked out of the shop and said in a loud voice. Nearby, Street Hines nodded and said, Mr. Dylan, our dominance is established. Now, he sneered at everyone and said, the people who want to enjoy the god's light for eternity, turn around and burn the shop behind you. As to those who are not willing. Meanwhile, in the grandest godly palace hovering in the sky, two priestesses dressed in pure white godly palace battle skirts stood on both sides. Dressed in black and red battle armor, Valkyrie Isabella pierced a holy sword that had shiny divine lights flashing on it into the ground before her. She gazed at the scene and said in a cool voice, do you think they will submit to us? He who knows the situation is a wise man, my lady. The priestess standing next to her had served her for countless years. In front of the great Valkyrie, these demonic gods that have just descended are as weak as grass. I think they will make the right choice. Before she could finish, they saw Sword Saint Wilson flying up into the sky. Following him, a large group of elves, mages, and orcs all slowly flew up into the air, standing before the Radiant Light Legion and the powerful demigods like a natural barrier. What are you doing? Street Hines and Street Dylan asked furiously. Street Dylan instantly gathered shiny godly light in his hand. It turned into a surging force which began to condense in his palm. You are all seeking death. This is God's wrath, a miracle spell that I recently learned from the Valkyrie. With intense murderous spirit in his eyes, Street Dylan instantly condensed a horrifying golden lightning snake with the energy in his palm. Although I've only mastered 10% of the spell, it's enough to deal with you guys. But in the next moment, he saw the white-robed Adolf of the Magic Union of the Morning Light Empire emitting tremendous presence. Violent gusts swept over, he even saw an endless ocean that was roaring. Don't make your invasion sound so righteous. After conquering more than 20 cities of our empire and causing countless casualties among troops and civilians, you dare to threaten us? It's outrageous. Adolf fraud. This is Poseidon's Rage, a new magic spell that I just learned. I only understand a tiny part of its wondrous power, but it's enough to deal with you guys. What a joke. You're an ant who had just reached the saint level. What nonsense is Poseidon's Rage? Street Dylan laughed mockingly. Then, lightning arcs poured down toward Adolf like furious dragons leaping out of the abyss. Suddenly, shocking thunderbolts tore through the void. At this moment, Everyone seemed to see a horrifying giant god coming out of the distant ocean. Stepping on the ocean with his head touching the starry sky, he unleashed a violent rage. With thunderbolts shooting out in all directions, a violent lightning force instantly swept out from Adolf like a storm. As the two godly thunderbolts touched, the two streaks of tremendous energies stood their grounds, but gradually, the golden thunderbolt seemed to falter. Then, it exploded abruptly. The radiant golden light poured back with the tsunami-like blue thunderbolts. Street Dylan was hit directly as if someone had smashed a huge hammer on his chest. His face turned pale instantly, and he almost fell from the sky. How? How could it be? Street Dylan pointed at Adolf with a trembling finger as horror appeared in his eyes. What magic spell did you use?